Have you ever been told you're too intense, too quiet, or too serious, when all you did was show up, fully, honestly? Have you ever watched a woman's eyes change? Not because you failed her, not because you hurt her, but simply because you didn't flinch? And have you ever caught yourself softening your voice, trimming your truth, folding yourself smaller, just to stay close to someone who once claimed to love all of you? I have. And if you're a man over 50, chances are you have too, because no one warned us that after all the building, after all the giving, after all the becoming, the very presence we fought so hard to embody might one day be too much for someone who hasn't met herself. Yet no one told us that a man who doesn't chase, doesn't panic, doesn't explain, might feel more threatening than the one who yells. It's not about what you do, it's who you are when you're no longer performing. And for some women, that kind of calm, that grounded, unshakable energy, it terrifies them. There's a certain peace that comes with age. After 50, something shifts. You stop chasing validation. You stop needing to prove you're the smartest, the funniest, the most impressive man in the room. You simply show up, steady, quiet, present, not to impress, but to witness, to hold space. But the irony, that stillness, that hard-won presence, gets mistaken. She calls it distance. She says you're unreadable, cold, detached, when in truth, you've just stopped reaching. Because when a man no longer lives from reaction, when his nervous system is settled, his voice is measured, to someone who's still searching for chaos, that can feel like absence. And too often we internalize that misunderstanding. We start asking, what's wrong with me? But maybe it's not about you at all. Let me tell you how I first saw this in real time. I was with someone once. We weren't fighting. I wasn't upset. In fact, I was listening, fully present, just breathing through the silence, and I watched her fold her arms, shift in her chair, look away. Not because I'd said something harsh, but because I didn't fill the silence with noise, because I didn't flinch. Later, she said something I'll never forget. It felt like standing naked in front of someone who never flinched. That's when it clicked. My stillness wasn't hurting her, it was reflecting her. I wasn't threatening her, I was mirroring what she hadn't yet faced, and that terrified her. That moment cracked something open in me. I started seeing the pattern. The more present I was, the more distant she became. The more honest I was, the more fragile the connection felt, and slowly I started shrinking, not because I lacked strength, but because I thought shrinking might make her feel safe. I dulled my edge. I smiled more, even when I didn't feel like smiling. I gave answers I didn't believe, just to keep the air warm. Until one day I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the man looking back. He was alive, but he wasn't present anymore. And that's when I realized, sometimes your energy isn't too much. It's just the first time someone's ever sat across from peace and felt exposed. So if you've ever felt like your calm made her anxious, if you've ever dimmed your truth to stay chosen, stay with me, because what follows might not just explain what happened, it might give you back the language to never abandon yourself again. Let's begin, because what happened between you and her wasn't just about timing or compatibility or even love. It was about energy, specifically what your energy revealed. See, Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." And that line kept coming back to me, because it helped me realize sometimes your groundedness doesn't trigger her because it's wrong. It triggers her because it's unfamiliar. Your calm? It reflects a part of her she hasn't yet met. Your steadiness? It holds up a mirror she didn't ask for, not a mirror of who she pretends to be, but of who she's still running from. And that, my brother, is where psychology meets reality. Because when a woman hasn't faced her own chaos, your stillness doesn't feel like safety. It feels like a threat. Let's unpack that. There's something most men don't realize, especially those of us over 50 who've walked through fire and come out quieter. Your calm might not feel calm to her. Your grounded presence, the way you sit with silence, the way you don't. Rush to fix, explain, or perform doesn't always register as strength. To some women, it registers as discomfort, and that used to confuse the hell out of me because we were taught, weren't we, that being non-reactive, emotionally available, steady, that's what women say they want. But here's the deeper truth I came to. See, the more grounded I became, the more present I got, the more some women pulled away. They didn't say, "You're unkind," or "You don't listen." No, they said things like, "You're too intense. I can't read you. It feels like you're watching me, not with judgment, but with something I can't hide from." And one woman, God bless her honesty, said something that hit me like lightning. It's like being in a room with a mirror that doesn't lie. That's when Jung's voice echoed in my mind again. Everything that irritates us about others leads us to an understanding of ourselves. It's called projection. When a woman hasn't faced parts of herself, her fears, her chaos, her ache for validation, she may unconsciously project them onto you. You become the screen, the emotional canvas, and the cleaner your energy is, present, rooted unapologetically still, the more clearly she sees what's swirling inside her. And that, my friend, can be terrifying. You're not attacking, you're not even reacting, but your presence disrupts her performance, not through dominance, but through quiet, unwavering awareness. Now, from a psychological lens, especially through Gottman's work, it makes perfect sense. If she never felt safe growing up, if her nervous system was tuned to conflict, inconsistency, or drama, then your stillness doesn't register as peace. It registers as absence, as void, as something missing. The silence between your words becomes louder than any shouting she's ever heard. And if love to her means caretaking, activation, emotional noise, then your calm feels like rejection. She doesn't feel seen because she's not being stirred. And so her nervous system, wired for turbulence, panics in the face of your quiet. What you're offering is regulation. What she's used to is dysregulation. That's the invisible mismatch. It's not about you. It's not even about her. It's about wiring. And if you don't recognize it, you'll start blaming yourself. You'll try harder. You'll over-explain. You'll adjust and dilute and bend until you're no longer present, just palatable. But here's the truth. If her nervous system is allergic to peace, then your presence, your very being, will feel like poison. Even if it's medicine. That's why strong energy triggers, not because it harms, but because it reveals, and not everyone is ready for that kind of mirror. So when she pulls away, don't make it your fault, and don't make it your burden to fix. When enough women pull away, not with anger, but with discomfort, something dangerous starts to happen inside you. You begin to internalize the echo. Maybe I am too much. Maybe if I smile more, talk less, stay light, she'll stay too. Maybe if I shrink just enough, I'll fit into the version of me she can hold. So you do, not all at once, but gradually. You speak with softer edges. You second-guess your stillness. You calibrate your energy to match her storm, not because it's who you are, but because it feels safer than being left. And the most dangerous part, you convince yourself it's love. But here's what shattered me and saved me. That version of me she seemed to love. He was never real. He was crafted, calibrated, curated to soothe her nervous system, not to express my soul. He was a shadow of what she needed me to be. And when you live like that long enough, you forget the sound of your own unfiltered voice. You begin to mistake self-betrayal for compassion. You label your muting as emotional maturity, and your own power. You start to fear it because it might chase her away. But deep inside, beneath all the edits, all the smiles, all the silences you swallowed, your soul knows. No connection, no matter how magnetic, is worth trading your presence for performance. And that's when I began to understand what Jung meant by individuation, the slow, sacred work of becoming whole. You cannot become whole by becoming half of yourself. You cannot be loved for who you are. if you keep showing up as who you're not, because even if she stays, she's staying with your projection, not your truth. And love built on illusion always fractures under honesty. What no one tells us is this: real love doesn't fear your full presence. Real love doesn't ask you to shrink. Real love doesn't flinch. So if your truth shakes the room, don't whisper it. Watch who stays. That, brother, is discernment. It's not about blaming her or judging yourself. It's about finally asking the right question. Can she meet me, not at my surface, but at my depth? Because here's what I know now, not in theory, but in scar tissue. You don't need to dilute your depth. You don't need to beg to be understood. You don't need to shrink to be safe. You just need to choose differently. Choose the woman who can sit in silence with you and not fidget, who sees your stillness, not as absence, but as invitation, who doesn't need you to break yourself into pieces just to fit into her comfort zone. Because that kind of woman, she meets you in the mirror. She doesn't run from your clarity, she rises with it, and in that space there are no performances, no auditions, just presence. And that, my friend, is where love finally learns how to breathe. It's easy to believe that when a woman pulls away, it's about you. Your strength, your steadiness, your silence that doesn't chase, your intensity that doesn't need to be loud. But what if it's not about you at all? What if her reaction, her retreat, her restlessness, her resistance isn't rejection, but reflection? Carl Jung said, "We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. And when someone hasn't made peace with a part of themselves, they project it." So when a woman tells you you're too much, she might be speaking, not to you, but to the unclaimed masculine within her, the part that longs to lead, to be still, to feel grounded, but can't. Your presence activates that shadow. You don't remind her of a man who hurt her. You remind her of the woman she hasn't yet become. And sometimes that's more frightening, because you're not the threat. You're the mirror. But here's the part I didn't see coming in my own journey. It wasn't just her shadow I was witnessing. It was mine too. Because if I'm honest, I wasn't always drawn to women who could see me. I was drawn to those who couldn't. The ones who were unavailable. The ones who couldn't sit in silence. The ones who confused emotional chaos with intimacy. Why? Because some part of me still feared being truly seen. Some part of me didn't believe I was worthy of a love that was calm, mutual, enduring. So I kept walking into mirrors that didn't reflect my wholeness, only my wounds. And that's when I began to understand another truth Jung gave us, the anima, the feminine within every man. She's not just soft, she's wild, deep, honest, discerning, intuitive, fierce. She's the part of you that feels grief deeply, loves without needing to conquer, and speaks truth without needing volume. But if you've never honored her, you'll seek her outside yourself. You'll go looking for women who carry your unmet emotions. And when they trigger you, you'll call it passion. When they can't stay, you'll call it fate. And when they leave, you'll call it loss. When in truth, it was a lesson, a mirror, a call to finally integrate what you've been exiling, because the real work isn't in fixing her. It's in meeting the parts of yourself you've been taught to hide, the parts you labeled weak, your need for tenderness, your ache for meaning, your tears you never let fall. But those aren't weaknesses, they're thresholds, and integration doesn't happen by force. It happens when you stop performing masculinity and start embodying it. Not the version that dominates, but the version that includes. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong work of becoming fully yourself, not half man, half mask, but whole, a man who holds space not just for fire, but for quiet, not just for strength, but for sorrow, not just for direction, But for depth, that, my friend, is what makes your presence powerful, not because it overwhelms, but because it contains, because when your energy includes every part of you, your masculine, your feminine, your voice, your stillness, that's not too much, that's truth, and truth is what makes love possible. If you've ever been called too intense, too serious, too still, too quiet, if you've ever had someone drift away from your presence, not because you didn't love deeply, but because your love didn't dance for attention, then this space is for you, because I know how it feels, to carry a calm that unsettles people, to walk into a room and notice eyes flinch, not because you raised your voice, but because you didn't fill the silence with noise. I know what it's like to be the steady one, and still be told you're too much, and I know how easy it is to internalize that. To start asking yourself, would she have stayed if I'd just softened my truth a little more? Would I still be loved if I became easier to hold? But here's what I've learned, not from books, not from theory, but from nights spent staring into the mirror, wondering if being seen would ever stop feeling like a risk. There is nothing wrong with the man who feels deeply. There is nothing wrong with the man who listens before he speaks, who holds silence like prayer, who doesn't apologize for presence. There is nothing wrong with you. Sometimes the very thing that makes your energy sacred is the exact thing that unsettles those who haven't met their own shadows yet. And that's not your job to fix. So if anything in this video reached something buried in you, even just a sentence, I want to invite you to reclaim something, not with a like, not with a share, but with a sentence. Write in the comments, I am no longer shrinking to be loved. Let those words anchor you. Let them be your return to center. Let them be your line in the sand. And if you've ever been blessed enough to be held by someone who didn't flinch when you stopped performing, who didn't run when you brought your full self to the table, tell us what it felt like to be seen without shrinking. Because other men need to know it's possible. They need to hear stories of women who didn't confuse calm for distance, of friends who didn't mistake truth for threat, of soul companions who met your silence like a language, because you're not too much, you never were, you were just waiting for the right mirror, one that reflects not your edits, but your essence. Let this be that mirror, for you, for us. For every man who once believed he had to vanish himself to be loved, not anymore. You don't have to whisper your presence. You don't have to rehearse your truth. You don't have to trade your stillness for acceptance. You are allowed to take up space. And if this video gave you even an inch of that space back, welcome home.